when we were talking about end of deadly second wave in Karnataka, we are now back with introducing containment zones, seeking RT-PCR from people entering our state from some of the concerning states like Kerala, etc. So, does this mean we are seeing the beginning of the third wave? To discuss this and some of the other issues concerning COVID-19, we have with us Dr. Giridhara Babu, renowned epidemiologist, COVID expert, and also a member of Technical Advisory Committee formed by the Government of Karnataka to mitigate COVID-19 in the state. We welcome you, sir.
Thank you for having me on this interview.
So Karnataka had just begun to see a consistent decline in the number of new infections, positivity rate, lower mortalities, etc. But now in the last few days, the state is seeing an increase in all of these. Chief Minister, who's newly appointed, is also been talking about, the concerns which our state may face. So especially Bangalore, Mysuru, Dakshin Kannada are some of the districts which are seeing an increase in cases. So do you think we are in the third wave, or are we going to see a third wave soon?
So again, thanks for having me on this interview, Ms. Chetana. So when you examine the trend of the infection, there are several ways of assessing it. If you examine effective reproduction number, which was very rock bottom maybe around June 20th, from then till now, it has only started increasing. And currently it is around 0.85. The moment it touches 1, very soon an outbreak will emerge very soon in terms of the number of cases that we must have seen in earlier waves. So the growing effective reproductive number is a concern, which means that there is going to be an impending outbreak. Whether this will be large enough, which will have similar casualties as earlier, or will we be able to contain, it totally depends on the actions that we take. So it's not about the virus that much, it's about what we do now in order to contain this, because there is clear trend in increasing in effective reproductive number.
So this, what you're talking about is the R naught number, right? So now when we are, when we're looking at Kerala, which is our neighboring state, and we have Dakshin Kannada and some of the other bordering, districts which are very closer to Kerala as such. So now, should we be alarmed about an increase in the number of cases in Kerala to that level, or is it actually happening in the state itself? So how is it? I mean, is it only because of the people coming in from Kerala, or how would that work?
Yeah, I think this is an important question that we need to understand. So it will be futile to base our strategies on one state. The combination of several factors lead to an outbreak. Number one, what was the background seroprevalence? Areas with lower seroprevalence are bound to have more number of cases. So that's the first factor. Second, what is the proportion of vaccination coverage in the population? So that's an important determinant in terms of what proportion of people after getting infected get hospitalized, and also how many might have the risk of death. To minimize both of this, vaccination coverage is important. And the third most important thing is these outbreaks or waves are bound to occur in every part of the world. So if we are assuming that we will not have another wave either in Karnataka state or in any particular state, that is only a wishful thinking. So given that the RT, what you said R naught is generally in the beginning of the outbreak, but as we track it's called as effective reproduction number, RT, as that is increasing, it is increasing now consistently to 0.85. That means that there are more cases happening in the community. Now, we need to do effective testing, identify these clusters as early as possible, and contain the transmission so that it doesn't spread. Preventing clusters, preventing crowds, especially in the indoor settings, is the most important thing in addition to vaccination coverage. So let me summarize. So Kerala is not alone at the risk of spreading infection to Karnataka. Infection can be spread from anywhere, any part of the world, not just Kerala. But once a virus travels to Karnataka state, these three factors are very important. There are many areas with low seroprevalence, which can see sudden spurt in numbers. So it need not be just Bangalore. Even within Bangalore, there might be pockets where low seroprevalence is there. Most of the northern Karnataka, central Karnataka, coastal Karnataka, where low seroprevalence is there, that's where the number of cases will be high. Second, what is the proportion of people who are vaccinated in all these districts, not just Bangalore? And what are we going to do to enhance vaccination coverage in those areas? And the third most important thing is, instead of tailor making the interventions based on one specific state, can we have uniform regulation preventing crowds, especially in indoor spaces, and ensuring compliance of COVID appropriate behavior, especially masking and distancing whenever there are congregations, and minimize the congregations to the maximum extent possible. So instead of going into the past, the way to look at this is, now I can confidently say we have an opportunity to prevent the onset and the mammoth extent of the next wave by taking actions right now.
Okay, so when you're saying taking actions right now, what are some? If you could list, you said there shouldn't be any indoor crowding, especially of crowding is something which has been talked about most of the times. So what else do you think we should do to mitigate this third wave as such?
Yeah, so there are several measures one should be taking. First, at the risk of repetition, we need to not think that this is usual, this is normal, the same message is being conveyed by the government, but we have to take it more seriously now than ever in the past. The reason is, Delta variant is supposed to be more infectious and it spreads faster and it can affect scores of people within a short span of time. So therefore, what we have seen earlier is nothing compared to what can happen if there are outbreaks now. Especially, we need to make sure that those who are not vaccinated and those who have high risk, like comorbidities or immunocompromised, they are protected. So here the responsibility is more on the vaccinated people because they can also transmit the infection. So one is to prevent crowds everywhere, anywhere, by conscious volunteer actions. And no amount of government enforcement can actually bring in the discipline unless people really feel that they should do it. That's the first thing. And if we remember the kind of deaths that we saw in the earlier wave, to prevent that, the only way is to mask up and then follow distancing and not do formation of any crowds. So that's the first. Next, to whatever extent is possible, the government should use all its machinery to enforce strict COVID appropriate behavior in any setting. It should be prevented. And it should become part of our life, part of our culture, that distancing is maintained and crowds are prevented. And there are some non-essential crowds which we have to reduce, be it marriages, be it functions, be it rallies, and these we have to minimize to a great extent, possibly back to our earlier levels, so that we are careful. If our vaccination coverage of 2 doses was more than 70%, we didn't have to worry about enforcing a strict COVID appropriate behavior. We know that the vaccination coverage is going to take some time, although the Karnataka state's progress is really good. But to cover a majority of the population, it's going to take at least a few more months. So therefore, enforcing COVID appropriate behavior is the most important strategy.
So now, I'm coming back to vaccination. So what is the status here in Karnataka now? Do you think we are doing good? Should we do something else to make sure that we ramp up the vaccination process? What is the status right now in terms of vaccine administration in the state?
Yeah, to be fair, Karnataka state's progress is really good compared to many other states, given the supply of vaccine that the state is getting. Especially if you just look at Bangalore city's progress in terms of vaccination, that is something commendable. But that also means that, including Karnataka, many states do not have adequate supplies of vaccine to ramp up the vaccination to cover everybody in the next 2 months, let's say. It's not possible. So we need to wait for the vaccine. But can we do passive waiting till we get vaccine supplies? The answer is no. And that's where I have been stressing from the beginning. We need to do micro plan. Many people don't know how to register for the vaccination. So we should be mapping all the eligible people. Currently, anybody above 18 is eligible. Every part of the state should map and register them onto the CoWIN platform and have a micro plan in terms of when and which site they would visit to get vaccinated. And then we need to have a strong mobilization campaign to mobilize them to those vaccination sites and get vaccinated when the vaccine supplies are available. And Ms. Chaitanya, this is not new to Karnataka or any other state. When the elections are done, every person above 18 years is almost taken to the polling booth and help with the entire process. We can do this. What we need is strong will and strong coordination and implementation, like what we have done all our other vaccination programs earlier. So that seriousness is required for enhancing vaccination coverage. I feel Karnataka has the position of being a leader in showing other states of the country that we can do it.
Okay, so when we're talking about getting people vaccinated with both the doses, we are seeing a lot of there is a lot of vaccine hesitancy. Two, there are districts which are reporting breakthrough infections also, and there is a lot of talk happening on the booster dose. So if you could touch upon all three of these, the vaccine hesitancy, the booster dose, the need, is there a need for booster dose, and also the breakthrough infection. So these three things, if you could touch upon.
Okay, let me start with hesitancy. I have maintained vaccine hesitancy is a convenient term which is collectively used for several problems. One is lack of awareness. So if somebody does not know how to register, somebody does not know the benefit of COVID-19 vaccine, we can't call that as vaccine hesitancy. This is purely failure in planning and including them in the vaccination sessions. So we cannot expect people to register on their own and come to vaccination booths when more than 50% do not come to public health facilities. Nothing can change now will make them so conscious and be aware of health programs. So vaccine hesitancy is a collective term used for lack of awareness, lack of micro planning, lack of mobilization, and finally a small bit where people are really not wanting to get vaccinated because of fear or any other reasons. Now, everybody thinks the last and the minor proportion is the mammoth part of this vaccine hesitancy. That's not true. We have implemented several vaccination programs in this country. Vaccine hesitancy is mostly a Western phenomenon. In the Indian context, this might exist in some groups who might have fear about the vaccines. But for that, government, UNICEF, WHO, together have implemented several social mobilization campaigns wherein clear messages using their own local leaders, Panchayat Raj institutions, and religious institutions have been done, and people have turned around and got vaccinated. So I think there's too much of myth around vaccine hesitancy. We need to break it down and then resolve it in the most scientific manner. The next question you had was on breakthrough infections. Now, vaccination is done to prevent death. Vaccination is done to prevent hospitalization, which means it will prevent severe illness due to COVID-19. In most cases of the vaccines, prevention of infection is not the goal. This was not with which the trials were made. So if we were to assume that after getting vaccinated, we won't get infected, that's a wrong thing. So people can get infected even after getting vaccinated, although the chances are low. So the reason is this virus goes and replicates in the nasopharynx. And if people don't wear mask and there is crowd and there is frequent interaction, those who are vaccinated can still be spreading to others. So the viral shedding may not be directly proportional to the viral load that they might have, and also the kind of benefits they will get as an individual. So this is the first important thing. So people might get infected. But if you look at what proportion of people after getting vaccinated succumb to fatality or have to get hospitalized because of severe illness, that is very, very rare. So to the extent people can say it almost gives 100% protection against death. and near 100% protection against hospitalization. So we take
So
vaccine
sorry to
because
interrupt you. Does this happen even with the Delta variant in play? At play, because there have been reports from Hassan, I think, where there have even with one single dose of vaccine, I think around 55 or 60 of them have succumbed, and then you have about 6 of them who have succumbed with even with both doses. So does this happen with Delta too?
so what is protection? What is complete protection? When we get 2 doses of vaccine and at least 14 days have surpassed with after the second dose, where complete immune response is available for the body, that's what complete protection is. Single dose of a vaccine will not definitely give the same level of protection what 2 doses give. So the incidents that we see, especially after 2 doses, are totally fewer compared to the unvaccinated. So we always have to compare what is this proportion in the unvaccinated and the vaccinated. So we are not saying it does not occur. What we are saying is based on the evidence, it's very rare compared to the unvaccinated. So given a choice, what would I do or you would do? We have to get vaccinated because we want to prevent hospitalization and death. So once that is done at the population level, then we can think of everything else, including the booster dose. I'll come to that in a bit. But as of now, breakthrough infections is not a surprise. If that occurs, that should not be a reason why we should not get vaccinated. In fact, that only proves that even if people get infection after getting vaccinated, they are saved from the hospitalization and death. So that's the plus side of the news. Finally, regarding the booster dose, currently there is no data, sufficient data available all over the world to suggest that a booster dose is required at least within 1 year of time. So this is the maximum time we could observe from the trial phase till the observation period that we have now. So it suggests that the vaccines, even in those who are already infected, vaccines provide better protection, and a vaccine 2 doses where it required in the duration that is suggested by the firms will give protection at least for a year or so. In the days to come, we'll have to yet to see how it is going to wane off, especially against some of the newer variants of concern which might come in the future. And then will there be an additional booster dose? Currently, at least the Pfizer and Moderna, what they're trying to do is incorporate what is the aspect of Delta that can integrate into their vaccine development. What we call as updating the vaccine is happening. And the same thing can happen even for the other vaccines, but unless they're specifically, for example, AstraZeneca, which is only for S protein, there you can't add really anything. Then you'll have to test a new one. The best bet, I am very eager to look at the data from Covaxin, because this is whole genome sequencing, which is used for the wholesale virion. So if there is protection against different variants of concern, and there do you still require booster dose in those? So these are the things that are part of our evidence search in the future. But for now, there's no need for booster.
Okay. So, sir, we recently submitted our seroprevalence report to ICMR, and according to that, most of the states did have good seroprevalence, and Karnataka also not bad. It has about 68% is what it's saying. So, I'm sure you have been part of the sero surveys here, which the state took separately also. So, have you been seeing the same kind of trend, or what is it like, and what does it mean to us? I mean, does it mean we are all really 68% seropositivity here in the state, which means that the third wave could be less severe? What does it actually mean to us?
So, fortunately, I've been part of both the national Zero survey and the state level Zero survey. Now, Zero surveys are very useful. They're like indicators or milestones which will tell us from where we are heading towards where. 67%, taking it as an average, based on the results from 2 districts for the entire state, may not be the appropriate thing to do. We have seen a great heterogeneity in the way districts are getting infected. Even within the districts, the urban areas were the ones which got infected in the first round when we did. Then it shifted to non-metro, which is non-Bangalore district headquarters and the other rural areas in the second round. In the days to come, I am sure that there are many areas where still the low seroprevalence is there, which is less than 30%, less than 40% in most of the places. And these are the areas which will see maximum number of spurt in cases. So 68% as an average for the entire state may not be the right thing to consider. Even if you consider that, that's not complete protection, or this is not guarantee that you will not have another wave. Given that Delta variant spread so faster, that only means that a vast proportion of the population is still susceptible for infection, even if you would assume everywhere in the state it is 68%, which is not true.
So most of the parents now, when we're talking about third wave, what has been told to everybody is that children are the most vulnerable. We know that there is no, proper report on this, or there's no studies which really proves this. Just because they're not vaccinated, we're considering them as one of the vulnerable population amongst with those who have not been vaccinated. Apart from that, I want to know now, there is a lot of talk happening on the vaccination for children. So we know, we have also been told that September is when we will be getting vaccines for children. So parents are anxious. They want to know whether they should vaccinate their children before sending to school, or whether they should wait. So what is your take on this?
Yeah, so there are a couple of things that we need to understand when it comes to children. So let me break down into several things. One, are children at higher risk of getting infection? Yes, because most of the children are susceptible. The seroprevalence is not readily available, but even based on the national seroprevalence, they are at higher risk of getting the infection compared to adults. Adults already have higher seroprevalence. Two, does higher risk of infection means higher risk of hospitalization or fatalities? The answer is no. The evidence from all over the world says that even if children get infected, the proportion of people who might require hospitalization or succumb is very, very small compared to adults. But that small is fatal for a parent. So even if we say it's less than 0.5%, even if we say 0.05%, that will amount to hundreds and thousands at the state and national level. So therefore, we can't take this as lightly saying that, okay, children are not at risk, so let's not worry about them. So that's not the message. The message is that we have to be careful. We need to protect them both from the infection and in terms of hospitalization. The third thing, which is not a good factor compared to adults, is in the post-COVID time, children might be at the risk of getting multi-organ inflammatory syndrome in children, which is the major reason why we should be worried about infection in children. So if you look at what's happening in Indonesia, the fatalities in children, the hospitalization in children is increasing. That's not a nice thing to see. So if this is happening in Indonesia, obviously there are some local factors which are responsible for this. We need to investigate that. So we need to be vigilant. We need to set up our surveillance system for detecting, screening the multi-organ inflammatory syndrome, and have facilities to take care of the children. Coming to the vaccination in children, there are several trials happening all over the world. As soon as the results are made available, children should start getting vaccinated. At least mRNA vaccines, there is evidence now between 12 to 18 years, it is safe, and these are peer-reviewed publications. But in the younger age group, what is the adverse effects that we need to monitor? We need to see whether that is the same problem that can occur if there are adverse events, even in India. So should we do bridge trials for those? And for the newer vaccines, can we do concurrent trials to understand whether children get benefited or not? So I think in the next few months, we'll have results available, and that's when we should think of ramping up vaccination and expanding to children.
Thank you, sir. So just to wrap up now, I just wanted to, if you could summarize, probably the concern areas where you think that the state government should immediately jump into and take action. The concern areas, if you could summarize that for us.
So, um, this battle against COVID-19 is not an event, unlike one election or one kind of uh, event that we can attribute to mark that, okay, second wave is over. Now let's start preparing when third wave comes. That's not like that. It's a process, and we need perpetual state of preparedness, and that will come only from very strong surveillance. We see that Karnataka is among a few states which do good testing, but the numbers are not enough. The equitable distribution of testing, so more than 50% occurs in Bangalore and in district headquarters. Beyond that, in the rural areas which have low seroprevalence, this is the time to expand testing and ensure we detect the outbreaks as early as possible. So that's the mainstay of the strategy. Second, wherever possible and everywhere, we should be able to prevent crowds. And this will happen from everyone. And the role models should follow it more strictly than common persons like me and you. So the role models, whether it's film stars or political leaders, religious leaders, they should prevent crowds. And by that, they should send a strong message to community that the pandemic fight is not over, and let's be very careful. And they should wear masks in all the things. So that's a very useful way of influencing people. Vaccination coverage has to be expanded. As I said earlier, we have to strengthen micro planning and have strong mobilization campaigns to make sure that when the doses are available, we quickly vaccinate and then show the rest of the country that Karnataka is a leader in vaccination. So that opportunity we have. We have some time now to act and make sure that the next wave will not be a problem at all, and it will not affect people in the way it affected earlier. And for that, we need to put in all our resources and get the act together.
Thank you very much, sir. It was really wonderful having you here with us. Thank you for watching. We'll come back with you with a new guest soon. Thank you very much.